Hello everybody, my name is Florian. Welcome you to this short video for the World Creativity Day. For the last 15 years I've been supporting people and organizations to be more creative and innovative. And today I'd like to share one key habit that you find in a lot of creative and innovative thinkers, and that's something that I've got mentioned very often from participants after weeks after a training was over, when we were in conversations about what was useful to them, what their takeaway. They would mention to me this key habit as a takeaway. It's something very simple to do, that can be applied in all kinds of situations, be it professional, be it personal. And when you apply this, basically what it helps you to do is to become a better creative thinker, to become a more innovative thinker, to help you come up with new solutions, new ideas, alternatives to whatever kind of situation that you are facing. A few words about myself. So, as I mentioned, my name is Florian. I am originally from Germany. I'm co-founder of a training and consulting company called creaffective. We have an office in Munich and we have an office in Taipei. You can also find my LinkedIn profile here. And I've been working in the field of creativity and innovation for the last 15 years, and I've published 5 books on the topic. And I'm now going to share with you that one little principle that is a foundation to many other things that help you to be more creative and innovative. Now let's dive in right into the topic. Now for this little exercise that I've prepared to work, you would need a piece of paper and a pen to write something down. So it can be a piece of post-it and a pen, or just any paper and pen that you would need to write something down in the next step. Now, what is that key habit that I've been speaking about? In creative thinking, if you look at systematic creative thinking, we can differentiate 2 phases of thinking that you see here visualized on the slide. One of them is called divergent thinking, that's the one on the left, and the other one is called convergent thinking, which is the one on the right. Now, what is divergent thinking? Divergent thinking is a broad, open search for different alternatives and different options. And you can see that here with the green visual indicated that it's leaving the area of what you already know, trying to go into new areas, into the directions you have previously maybe not thought about. So it's looking broad into many different alternatives and options. Now please notice that I'm saying here options and not ideas, because this is something that can not only be applied when it comes to coming up with new ideas how to solve something, but that might also be used to look for alternative questions or alternative explanations. So for example, you could diverge on why somebody is behaving in a certain way, or you might diverge, that means trying to come up with different options of why a machine suddenly stopped working. So this is what's meant by divergent thinking. Now, its counterpart on the right side is what we call convergent thinking. Now, this is about narrowing down, selecting, evaluating, but at the same time in a positive way, with an open mind and with a positive attitude, narrowing down and focusing out of the maybe many options that we have found in that diverging phase, now to see which ones are the most relevant, the most interesting ones that we would like to consider further. Now, a key element, that's the thinking habit, and that's the message that I hope that you take from this short video. The key about this, and this is indicated by the dotted line in the middle, The key about this is that you don't do them at the same time, but you try to separate them from each other. So that means while you diverge, you do not converge. That means while you look for different options and alternatives, you do not at the same time try to evaluate them, try to narrow them down. Now that sounds very easy, and if you're skilled at this and if you have practiced this, it is actually easy. However, for many people, for most people, this is very often very challenging to do, especially also in a group setting and especially in an organizational setting. And there is one indicator when you know that you're actually mixing up the two, that you're not separating them. It's two little words that sometimes you can hear in your own head or you can hear other people saying them. And these two little words are called yes, but. I'm quite sure you have heard those before, right? So here's an idea of what we could do. Yes, but that won't work. Yes, but we've never done it this way. Yes, but we have always done it differently. Yes, but the boss won't like it. Yes, but. So yes, but, when you hear yes, but in your head or somebody else saying it, you know that we are currently mixing up the two phases, that we're not keeping separate. So basically what separating divergent and convergent thinking is all about is that you're able to quiet the yes but voice in your head and to not do them at the same time. So how does separating divergent and convergent thinking actually work? I've prepared another visual. So here, this is how it could look like. So we first, and that's important of what you do, we first generate options where we try not to judge the alternatives or options that are coming up. Then we take a pause. We do what's called deferring judgment. So we might already hear that little voice in our head, but we are conscious of it and we basically tell it to hold on for a bit. And then we go into the evaluating part. So we go into the convergent thinking, where we will still use an open and positive attitude to filter through and look at the different options that we currently have and see which are the ones that have the most potential. Now, for most young kids, they're actually very good at the divergent thinking part for different reasons. School and education system being a major factor. We as adult people, we are having challenges, especially with the divergent part, so with coming up with options in the first place. And one reason for that is because we constantly mix up the two thinking phases of divergent and convergent thinking. So we've basically always been told, as soon as you have an alternative, an option, or idea, you should evaluate it right away, and you should only come up with or only mention the most meaningful, the correct, the right answer. So what I would like to do, and this is part of the exercise, I would love to do a short exercise with you on divergent thinking. Now for this, you would need your piece of paper and a pen. And what I will be doing is I will be showing you on the next slide, I will be showing you an object, and I will then give you 40 seconds of time, and I would ask you to write down all the ideas you have of what this object that I'm showing you, of what it is, of what it could be, or how it might be used. And anything that comes to mind, I would ask you to write it down on a piece of paper until I say stop. So we are ready. Let's go. This is it. This is my object. Please write down all the ideas that you get, what this is, how it can be used, or what it might be, until I tell you to stop. And stop, please. So now what I want you to do is please count the number of items you have just created, that you've just written down or found on your list. And if you're like most people who do this for the first time, then you will have something between 3 to 5 options on your list. So 3 to 5 things of what you found, what this is, or what it could be, or how it might be used. So some things that people come up with could be, well, it's a post-it, it's a piece of paper, it's a carpet, it's a box where we can put things in, it's a screen, a laptop screen, so whatever it is, anything is fine actually. Now also reflect back about the exercise and what you just did, and maybe some of you, while you did the exercise, you had an idea and then for whatever reason you decided not to write it down. And that already brings us to some of those ground rules for divergent thinking that are very much connected to our key principle here of separating divergent and convergent thinking. So the first 2 ground rules for divergent thinking are defer judgment, that's the first one, and strive for quantity. Now, if you had a situation in the last exercise where you thought of something and then for whatever reason you decided not to write it down, basically what you did is you had a yes but voice in your head, so you mixed up divergent and convergent thinking. And this first ground rule of deferring judgment basically again emphasizes that when you hear that little voice in your head that says yes but, just tell it that it might be right, but right now it's not important, and you ask it to hold on. So you defer judgment. And then there's a second part which is also relevant for divergent thinking, and why we are creative in the first place, or try to be creative in the first place, is that we currently don't know yet what the solution will look like or what the answer will be, and we try to get many options in order to increase the likelihood that there are some good options in there. So these are the first 2 ground rules: deferring judgment, striving for quantity. Now we do this one more time, trying to keep those 2 ground rules in mind, that I will be sharing with you a second object. And again, I'm going to give you about 40 seconds of time, and I would ask you, again, take a piece of paper and write down anything that comes to your mind, what the object is, what it might be, or how it might be used. So we're ready. 1, 2, 3. This is it. This is the object. So please write down anything this is, what it might be, or how it might be used. And remember, defer judgment and go for quantity. The number of options that you currently had, maybe you discover, or hopefully you discover, that you have found a bit more than in the first round. Maybe it was already a bit easier for you to actually defer that judgment voice in your head and to keep going. And there are 2 more ground rules which I would love to introduce to you, which are connected again to deferring divergent and convergent thinking, or of separating the 2, and which is connected to divergent thinking. There is a third rule that's called seek wild ideas. So we deliberately try to come up with new, unusual, wild ideas that we haven't thought about before. That doesn't necessarily mean that all the options that you will have are actually completely wild or unheard of, but you give yourself permission to think a bit differently, and this often leads to ideas that you actually haven't thought before. And when you then later on enter into the convergent thinking stage. So when it goes to evaluating and selecting, you might actually discover that some of these new ideas are actually helpful or useful for you. And that leads us to a ground rule for divergent thinking, which is called build on other ideas. So also what we try to do here is, once you have an idea, you try to hold that little yes but voice in your head, you try to defer it, and you try to build on the idea and see if you can make something out of it, if you can extend it, if you can build on the idea. So this is what separating divergent and convergent thinking is all about. I hope that you take away from this short little video this key point: 2 phases of thinking. One is opening up, looking for alternatives. The other one is evaluating, narrowing down. And the key point is that we should not do them at the same time, but that we try to keep them separate. Now here's some practice advice for implementation. When you do this, first of all, notice your own yes but voice. That's the first thing. So in the future now, try to notice your own yes but voice. Tell the voice to hold on. So defer the judgment, be open to what comes up next, and try to build on it. When you do this together with other people, what I also recommend you to do is that you make it explicit, so that you very briefly tell people that there are these 2 phases of thinking and that it's all about keeping them separate, so that it is explicit, that people know about it. And what you can also do is that you frame this as an experiment. So some people might be skeptical in the beginning, and what you can do is you can ask people if they would be willing to do a short experiment with you, where you would, instead of having your normal discussion when it comes to thinking about alternative solutions, where you would run a short experiment where you this time would actually apply these 2 phases of thinking and trying to keep them separate. And I can promise you, because that's the one thing that has been coming back over the last 15 years from training participants, if you do this from now on, if you try to consciously separate divergent and convergent thinking, at some point this will become really easy for you. You will become more proficient, and most of all, you will come up with ideas, alternatives, and solutions that you have not thought about before. So it will help you to become a more creative